see what we're doing. Yeah. Oh.
Ladies, this is about the only time I can ever say that, John, sorry. Ladies, it is a joy to welcome you to the Babcock-Smith House Museum this afternoon for a program by Nancy Balentine on her lovely, lovely quilts. I have to get in a little plug ahead of time before she begins. If you're not members and you'd like to be, I do have membership envelopes up and back, and we will refund your $2. We're in the process of putting an addition on this building so that we can have more programs like this and you can be even closer, which we are going to break ground for within the next 3 weeks probably. So we're very, very excited about that. It is a great pleasure to see so many of you that I already know, and to welcome those of you whom I don't know. Nancy has been quilting for nearly years, and she will tell you what she wants to tell you about herself and the program, which is divided into 3 parts, and I'm sure you will have a wonderful time. Nancy?
I get excited when one person comes to my house to see quilts. So you can't imagine how excited I am today. Thank you so much for coming. And here we go. This room is wonderful for my purposes because most of my quilts are really small. And I think you're going to be able to see them without much ado at all. If you don't hear me, put your hand up and I will really try to speak more loudly. I want to thank the volunteers who are going to have a workout soon, holding up the quilts. Rosalie Maxim, an old friend, teaching friend from Groton, and Barbara Chonacki, who I have known for a long time as a wonderful quilter and design company owner, and she's great. We're going to move quickly because there is a time element, and if there's any time left, there could be questions at the end. Now I'm all tied up with this and with this, and I just need a moment to get organized here. First, before I show you any quilts, I'm going to make some observations about quilters. Quilters are funny people. Quilters never mention the word heirloom, but they think about it a lot. Quilters worry about whose quilts will be hung next to theirs in quilt shows. Quilters go off the deep end at the mention of polyester, even cotton polyester. Quilters are evangelists for their craft. They even work their stash into their last wills and testaments. Quilters value the sisterhood. They value the retreats, bus trips, guilds, and shows in a way that is more complex and energetic, I think, than other craft people. Quilters welcome men into the craft. In fact, a couple years ago, my son and I went to Shelburne Museum and saw a whole show by men. It was called Man-Made Quilts. Entire show. It was wonderful. I know that Calvin Coolidge made the tumbling blocks quilt when he was 10, and I hear that President Eisenhower made quilts. Quilters have a vocabulary all their own. We know what the real meaning of mat and ditch and sash and tin lizzie and bat and crazy and long arm and log cabin and bee, etc., that the general public doesn't know about. The quilting world has rock stars, and one of them is here today. And her name is Barbara Barber. And she is the American Barbara Barber, because there is a British Barbara Barber. And we have a whole galaxy of wonderful quilters whose names are known all over the country and sometimes all over the world. There's another one in Westerly. Her name is Judith Larzalaire. She is extremely well known, and she makes her living with quilting, which is amazing. Quilters are altruistic to the max. They extend comfort in the form of quilts to individuals and groups by the thousands. There is one ongoing controversy in the quilting world. It's in all the quilting circles. It's mentioned practically every month in some magazine or other, and that is, what is an art quilt? What is art and what is craft about it? And even to the point of what is a quilt? There are definitions of that are not completely compatible with each other. This is the latest definition by the Studio Art Quilt Associates. Listen to it and see if it means very much to you. This is what they say an art quilt is. The art quilt is a creative visual work that is layered and stitched, or that references this form of stitched and layered construction. And I just find that amusing, and I think it'll be a controversy that never really ends. And I tend to stay away from the word art and quilt entirely. I never personally use the term. I'm going to just say a couple of words about myself. There are a number of people who helped me learn about quilting. They didn't even know that they were helping me to learn about quilting. My mother-in-law, Marion Balentine, in the 70s, took me to visit a cousin of hers in Massachusetts. And little did I know, what I was really attending was a turning. She had her living room floor this high in quilts, big, full-size quilts. And she proceeded to peel them off and show them to me. I was 35 years old. I had never seen a quilt before, so that was very exciting. I went to her daughter's house and saw quilts on the wall. That was a real revelation. So I never saw a quilt in my early days at all. But I did come home and make a quilt from that. I hadn't seen a book. I hadn't had a lesson. I didn't know anybody else who quilted, but I made a quilt and I hung it over my piano, and I thought it was wonderful. I didn't know how to piece, so every place where there should be a piece, I just appliqued squares onto a solid background. It's hysterical. And I had no sooner got that done than I saw in the paper that there was going to be a class at the Westerly Y, and that a woman named Jean Napier was going to give lessons with one block at a time. And lo and behold, Jean is here. This is a lesson 40 years ago. And Jean, would you stand up just for a minute? So I owe all my early understandings of how to put a quilt together to Jean. And I remember one day I was really sick. I think I had the flu. And it was the day of our lesson. So I really debated, should I go there and get everybody else sick, or should I miss the lesson and not know how to do it? So I went. But I went early, and I asked her if I could sit in the corner and listen, so nobody would get sick. So that's what I did. So Jean, you started it all, and she was a great teacher. Nothing seemed to be very hard. It was all okay. Whatever, it was all okay, but she had perfect lessons. I had a Campfire Girls leader, marvelous woman named Grace Wilbur, and she taught me all kinds of needlework except quilts. Another person that many of you know is Dorothy Maxon of Westerly. 5 years of Monday night classes at her house, and I finally could embroider fairly well. My mother, who let me use her sewing machine at will, very nice. Some mothers, it's too special, and of course the machines today cost so much. I'm not sure she'd let me do it today. And the last that I would like to acknowledge is the Ninigret Quilt Guild, upon whom I depend for ongoing lessons in quilt making, and they do a great job providing experience and education. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my quilts. First, I started with samplers. We made a sampler quilt with Mrs. Napier, and that was fine. I liked doing that. It took a long time to get all those blocks, so it was a long process. Gradually, I came to prefer non-block quilts. And the early quilts were big, and I gave them most of them away, and most of them are in not good condition now. The newer quilts are small, and I don't give them away so much because I really like them. The big change that came to me was that quilts could have more than design. They could have meaning. And once I grasped that, and grasped that quilts did not have to be made in blocks, I got a lot more interested. The light kind of went on, that some quilts can convey meaning, can convey ideas. And in my working life, that was what I did. I taught children in 8th grade to understand the writings of other people through the ages of literature, and also to create meaning in writing of their own for other people. So I was always engaged in the transfer of meaning. And when I discovered that quilts could do it too, that was great. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 quilts that don't really relate to the rest of the show, just in case anybody doesn't know what a sampler quilt is. This is going to be, okay. This first one is a sampler quilt, which is great fun to make.
How many quilt shows? This is my first, and yours is 200.
Yes, this is Rosalie's first quilt show. And since she got me into this, I decided she could have the job. Okay, so you see the inner ones are old blocks. The outer ones all around the outside are newer blocks, and I put this together a couple of years ago to get rid of some of my unfinished work. So that's the kind I don't make anymore. Andrea! Okay, thank you. And then I moved along with the idea that I could choose one block, not have every block different and take a year to come up with that many blocks, but I could choose one block and make lots of them. And this is kind of a transitional piece too. So this is called Windblown Square. And you will see that once you make one and you know you can do it, once you make one block, then you know you can do it. Then the rest of it is work. It isn't that much fun. You've got to do another block exactly the same, and they're hand pieced and hand quilted in the Baptist fan. And I decided I just couldn't bear to make a block and then make it again and again and again and again. So I quit that. And the rest of the show, I quit it except for one that's exceptional that will come along later. Thank you very much. And so the show will start now with quilts that honor. The first batch are quilts that honor certain things, certain people. They commemorate special events. They are pieces that rescue other people's needlework. Okay. They reproduce antique quilts. They translate children's art to quilts. They quote a wonderful poem, etc. This first one is really special, and many of you know the person who gave me this red work in the middle. Mildred Bray, who was a docent here, gave me a bag full of various pieces of needlework. And I knew that I was responsible for them. She said, here they are, like, do something. And so I chose some of them to be framed, and others I put in various kinds of settings of patchwork. This is very old. It's on linen, and I just surrounded it. And the thing that makes it a lot of fun is that this fabric has high-heeled shoes. So Miss Bray would probably be shocked to know that her red work has high-heeled shoes attached to it. Okay. The second one is also Miss Bray's. These are 3 laces that came in the bag that she gave me. I like to honor other needleworkers whose small pieces are going to get lost in the generations that come. And I just feel their best chance is somehow to be in a quilt. It's very tricky to sew lace to a background. Very thin thread, thin needle. And I added color in the base to make it just more like a poster. I like posters. I bet some people are thinking about little bits of lace in your house and what you could do with them.
I have 21 feet of hand-knitted lace.
Oh dear.
I'm contemplating until this moment sewing out a quilt.
This This is called Brown Rabbits, and it's cross-stitch on silk, and I did it, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I had spent so much money having things framed, I wasn't going to do that. On the left side are rabbits that are Liberty fabric. I just love the Liberty fabrics. This is machine quilted in the ditch. For people who don't know what the ditch is, it's where the connecting lines come for the pieces. It's the only thing I've ever quilted in the ditch. It's a little different. And the next one is called Balloons and Kites. These are 4 canapé napkins that I purchased from an estate sale. The napkin is bounded by the yellow. So I took the 4 napkins and sewed them onto pieces of fabric, and 2 of them are flying kites. The 2 middle ones, I think, are flying kites. If you look up, you'll see the kites. And the other 2 are balloon people. And these come from Italian folklore. Several Italian people have told me that is from Italian stories. And I don't know more about it than that. If anybody does, I don't know, but I loved them. And they are hand appliqued pieces. You look at them, you look at the tiny stitches that applique those very thin fabrics, and you wonder how they ever did it. I just couldn't let them go unprotected.
Like the symbol of the clown, and not that I know this much about it, but it even crosses over like into the opera, Pagliacci. And Rigoletto, this is the court jester, so that's a theme that comes through.
I see.
As that lady indicated, a lot of artistic venues.
Well, I was thrilled to find them. It wasn't the story so much that got me, but the fineness of the applique. I had never seen anything like it. This next one is the only sad quilt I have. It is a poem about divorce. The assignment in the 8th grade was write an acrostic poem, which means that the title is down the side, divorce. And this was written by an 8th grade boy, and I have come to realize that all the things that I saved from my children's writing experience, so many of them are so wonderful. This is the only one I have saved. I will read it. Rosalie, you read it to people.
Discouraging and pathetic incident that makes a child visualize the future and observe strange events that reach to destroy the comfortable touch of love engraved into his patient trust.
It's a very, It's a very moving poem, and yes, yes. And I don't know what happened to him. The classes are so big, you don't get much chance to discuss things with.
He's a marriage counselor now.
The design at the top is my son's design. He's here. When he was in high school, I looked at this poem for a long time and thought, well, I just can't have just a poem on a quilt. There has to be a design. And I didn't know what to put on for design. And I ran across this that John did in an art class somewhere along the way in Westerly High School, probably. And I saw that originally this had been a solid piece of paper. And he cut it carefully and pulled it away and glued it on. And I thought it made a very apt artistic addition to this. And I put the black on this busy fabric that it looks happy and everything is wonderful, and then this is what is happening with this kind of background. I didn't want it to be beautiful. I didn't want it to be anything except memorable, and it is memorable. There was a man who saw this. He just closed his eyes and he turned around and walked out of the room, because I knew that he had a personal experience like this. So that's the divorce quilt. It's the only downer in the group.
Was that applique?
That's applique. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the kinds of, I have that picture. You can hold this picture. One of the kinds of quilts I like to work on are children's art and turn them into quilts. And the picture was done by my granddaughter when she was 5. And I looked at it for a couple of years, and it just didn't look as if it had enough oomph to it. But I loved the colors, so I decided I would try.
Excuse me.
That's okay. And I added some sparkly flowers at the top to just sort of fill it in a little bit. And then I found that wonderful fabric for the bottom that went with it so well. And this is hand appliqued and quilted. It's one of my 5 favorite quilts, and I didn't even want to start it. Her sister went on a date with her dad to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And when she came home, she drew a picture of Isabella Stewart Gardner in her garden. And I didn't bring the picture, but yes, I did bring the picture. It's right here, Rosalie. That's what she drew. She was about 10 at the time. And I began to realize what potential these quilts, little children's art, had. So I have made 18 of them, and I have done a show with just children's art, which doesn't work very well in big areas. This is perfect for the little quilts. I added the flowers, the birds, and the butterfly, but she has shown that it's in the atrium. And if you have been to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, you know that the garden is in the center. There are all kinds of wonderful Greek and Roman columns, and it's a great place. So she was tickled that that became a quilt. I'm going to take just a break here and show you Charlotte's bugs, which are in process. I ran into somebody who said, well, I hope you're going to show how you do the children's quilts. So I have one in process, and I thought I would show you. These are bugs. There are 4 slugs and a caterpillar and some bees. So what do I do? How do I approach this after I look at it for quite a while? I take it to the copy shop and I have them make an enlargement. The kids like it to be bigger than it really is. They're very impressed with it being bigger. So I take it to the copy shop. I usually have 2, But now they're getting very expensive, so I only have one. And I cut it up and then I glue it back together, you know, I scotch tape it back together. And I just use these for templates and applique them on and just do what comes. So this is where this quilt is now. It's just started with the bugs. It will have borders and it will get quilted. So that's kind of in a nutshell how that happens.
Could I ask you the picture of the children's book there?
This is the way she gave it to me. She did this in school.
Oh,
Yeah, so it
so
probably,
you may have done this
they
after
probably
they read the
related
book.
to a
Yeah.
book. Right, right. Okay, so that's Charlotte's bugs. These little children's quilts make the children happy, but they make the parents really happy. Yeah. The next one is the Blessings quilt. This was for my son's 30th birthday, the one that's here. I have two sons. This is my own design. I used the hymn, God Moves in a Mysterious Way. The whole verse is, the music is here, and you could actually play it on the piano from here. It's in the key of E flat. The words to the third verse are printed on there. Let me see if I can read it. Ye fearful saints, it starts right over here. Yeah, ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy and will break in blessings on your head. Mm-hmm. And then, you can't see it very well, but I quilted subtly lots of the things that I thought and John thought were his blessings in his life up until age 30. And they're all over. They're Sunday school teachers, there are family members, there is his old car, the Appalachian Trail sign. He did the Appalachian Trail, the whole thing. And all over it, high school friends, etc. They're hard to see. You have to go looking for them. Anyway, that's the Blessings quilt. And the next is the honoring of a whole group of people, the Amish. And I admire their quilts so much, I have made copies of them. This is a very close reproduction of an antique Amish quilt, but it is much smaller. You notice the classic quilt that the Amish do is totally geometric, but not symmetrical as to color, which is something that makes it very likable to me. And the quilting design is also Amish. It's not something I dreamed up. It really was on that quilt. Quilters like to make reproductions, and because we would like to own the original, and we can't own the original. So here we go, we copy them. And the last one in this group is a different kind of Amish quilt. It comes from Ohio, and the Ohio Amish are known for being more liberal. And they actually will use real things. This one has a house, houses. So this is a very exact copy of an Amish quilt. And let's see. We know it is not a church building because the Amish don't have churches other than in their homes. So I would say this is either a school, and actually that's sideways. Yeah, if you just this is the corner. That's the upper corner. Yeah, yeah. And this was quilted by April Gilroy down in Wakefield. And she did a fabulous job. She quilted white where it was white, and pink where it was pink, and black where it was black, and I could never, ever have done that. So it takes other people to help you out with certain parts of the quilting. I love this quilt. I just think it's wonderful. I shouldn't say that. But I didn't design it. I didn't even pick the colors. It's as if it were somebody else. It's just a total reproduction. Yeah. Yeah. So we're moving on now to the second group. These are the teaching quilts. There aren't so many of them. I wish I had had them when I was teaching. I didn't make them until I had retired. But my daughter in Indiana is an English teacher, teaches 8th grade, same as I did, so she can use them. And she sent one of them back to me recently, which was great of her. Costs a lot of money to send them in the mail. The teaching quilts can be used in literature classes, in Sunday school. You can teach other quilters. You can entertain small children with picture stories. And these quilts get a lot of attention. This is The Little Prince. The Little Prince is a great book. I have right here. I used to read little sections of it to my classes because it's a great ethical, moral, but non-church book. You can learn so much about ethics and morality from this book and never be suspected of trying to engender any religious sort of thing. This is A Little Prince. The book was written by Saint-Exupéry, who was a Frenchman, but he did not write this book in France. He wrote it on Long Island because that's where he was, had to be during the war. He was a flyer and he had to leave France, and he lived on Long Island and was summoned to Washington frequently to identify places in Africa. He drove a mail plane to, over Africa, down to South Africa from France, and he also flew to South America, tip of South America. He's a great aviator. But he wrote these incredible little books. And on Long Island, of all places, not in France. And that's his version of Little Prince, right in here. So I wish I had had it when I was teaching The Little Prince. I did a second one, the baobab trees from The Little Prince, which is the next one. And he explained that on his planet where he came from, there were seeds that if you did not get them when they first sprouted, you wouldn't be able to dig them out. And they would get away from you. And they would eventually split your planet up. And so that is a metaphor for taking care of the small things that are not good in your life, taking care of them early on, because if you don't, they can sometimes just keep growing and you can't stop them and they will break up your life. That is a pretty dramatic drawing of, you see the man up there who with his axe, he's trying to cut the baobabs back and he can't do it. So. And the third one from The Little Prince is a conversation that's taking place between the little prince and a drunkard. The little prince is visiting different planets to try to find a friend. He's never had a friend. And so he goes to a planet where there is this man. And he says to the man, "Why are you drinking?" The little prince asked. "To forget," replied the drunkard. "To forget what?" asked the little prince. "To forget I'm ashamed," confessed the drunkard, hanging his head. "What are you ashamed of?" asked the little prince, who wanted to help. "Of drinking," concluded the drunkard, withdrawing into silence for good. And the little prince went on his way, puzzled. This is a different technique. The outlines are embroidered first. All the outlines of everything are embroidered first, and then pieces of fabric fit in that don't necessarily even have to touch the edges. So that is a little bit different technique. Good. The next one is called the Lochinvar quilt. And this is the one my daughter uses in Indiana, and she just sent this one back. She teaches in Evansville, Indiana. And the story is by Walter Scott, Sir Walter Scott. I thought it was set in Scotland, but it isn't. It's an Irish story. And it's the story is, maybe I can come out here and help with that. The story is that Lochinvar has heard that the woman that he wanted to marry, Ellen, is marrying somebody else. The father and mother didn't like Lochinvar, and they arranged for her to marry somebody else. So here's Lochinvar. He hears about the wedding, and he's rushing off to do it, probably to try to keep it from continuing. Then here's the wedding party. You can see her in her wedding dress, and here's the groom, and the wedding has happened. He didn't get there on time. But he does arrive for the reception. And here he is in purple, his purple cape, and here she is, and the parents are very nervous. Lochinvar's here, what are we going to do? And Lochinvar puts them at ease. He says, I'm going to have one drink, I'm going to have one dance, and I'm gone. You'll never see me again. So they kind of relax, and he sees her. He throws his drink into the air, and they dance. And he tells her that his horse is right outside the door. They will dance toward the door. And you can fold it over. You're probably getting exhausted. Yeah, we're down at the bottom here now. So here is Lochinvar lifting her onto his horse. And every picture shows the groom. He's just standing there. He's really not very exciting at all. And here are all the relatives getting on their horses, getting ready to chase after Lochinvar. But the poem ends. The poem is wonderful. The poem ends with the fact that he never was seen again, and neither was the daughter. Okay. Okay, the credit goes to James Thurber for the cartoons. James Thurber was nearly blind, but he drew cartoons, very basic forms, and illustrated a whole book of English poems. Okay, so you can see a lot of plaid there because I thought this was all Scottish. My daughter says, I don't think so, Ma. I think it's, look at the geographical references, it's Irish. And the next one is the crocodile in the bedroom. And this is the first fable in Arnold Lobel's book, Fables. Now, nobody writes fables anymore. Aesop was practically the last one. There was a Frenchman, Montaigne. Maybe there are two other people who have done fables. The book is marvelous. He not only wrote the fables, but he drew all the pictures. It is great. And I did read a lot of that book to my classes. The story is that the male is in the bed. He was very fond of the wallpaper in his room because all the flowers were equidistant from each other and the colors were perfectly separated and it was totally organized. He loved his wallpaper. And his wife didn't. She loved her garden, Mrs. Crocodile. And she finally said to him, you're turning yellow. You need to get out in the air. Come out and see my garden. So he did. And he didn't like it. It was messy. It was weedy. The colors were not appropriately placed, etc. So he went back and got into his bed and enjoyed his wallpaper flowers. And the moral of that is, without a doubt, there is such a thing as too much order. The crocodile is appliqued, the bedspread is silk, and it's hand quilted. Okay, the next one is for teaching quilters. As I said, I learn from the group that I go to work with, and quilters, since I need to learn things, quilters provide information for them. This is a special kind of quilt called a Welsh strippy. It's very common in Wales. They're usually full-size bed quilts, and they don't have this topping thing that I put on them, the 2 extra colors. They're just the 2 colors. And they are working bedspreads for people in Wales. The fun part of doing that was to see if I could get the quilting to go up the line and go through those colors as one solid thing, but not having any separation in the upper colors. And it's hand quilted in real Welsh patterns. And notice that the width of the strips is not, they're not equally, they're different widths. Yeah. So that's that one. And the next one is called the Keeping Quilt, and it's from this book. Wonderful book. It's the end papers. The whole book is a story of a Jewish family that came from Russia, and once they were all here, they decided that they would take their clothing that they had brought with them and make it into a quilt that they would always have. This was the old stuff from Russia. And then they used that. The whole book is how they used the quilt. And the only color in the book is the quilt. All the other parts of the pictures are in black and white. So the quilt is really the center of the story. And they use it for a huppah. They use it to cover their dying grandmother. It just shows all the different ways they enjoyed using their quilt. So I took this to Pine Point once, and the little kids really liked it. But I'm not sure they got much out of the story. They liked the quilt. This was written by a woman named Patricia Polacco, who didn't learn to read until she was 14. She had such severe reading problems. Someone finally was able to teach her to read. And then she wrote 60 books. And she bought a fire station in Minnesota to do her artwork for her quilts. Okay, this is the last one in this group. This is called the alphabet quilt. All the quilts have stories. I'm sorry, but this one is the alphabet quilt, and of course you could teach kids the alphabet. This was designed by a woman named Margaret Landon in the 30s. She was the wife of a missionary to Siam, which is now Thailand. And she didn't have a lot to do there, so she studied the history of Thailand, and she discovered this story about a woman and the king, and she wrote the bestseller called The King and I. It became 3 movies and a Broadway musical. And she made a lot of other quilts too, and I just thought that one was wonderful, so I made 2, and one of them is in Indiana. The original is 70 by 84, and she made 4 of them. Mine is just 25 by 34. It's a great exercise in applique and echo quilting. Okay. Oh, we have 2 more to go in this group. We've got to hurry. Okay. The next one is called the Burning Bush Quilt. This teaches Exodus 3:3. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. It's hand appliqued and beaded. The yellow and orange beads are for live embers, and the gray beads rising in the air are for the spent embers. It's hand quilted with silver thread, and that's that one. The next one is the Matthew 14 quilt. It's a design from a postcard that I bought in Israel in 2000. The painting is by a woman named Tamar Messer. And what I really love about this quilt is the complexity of the design, but particularly the 2 men's faces, the two apostles in the boat. They look scared to death, and I took several hours to make them look scared to death. There are many applique layers. The fish, there are 7 layers of fabric in the fish. The black felt is applique. That's why I didn't do it for so long. I didn't know how to deal with the black. And so I used black felt and appliqued it on. There is no glue at all. The moon fabric is home decorative fabric, and it really shines more than a regular white would have. The faces and hands are felt. I love the playful border. She had a little bit on her border, and I just sort of took it a little farther. When I saw the ocean fabric in my stash, I knew that I should do that one. Okay. The last group are quilts that cheer. So they're not quilts that teach you anything. They're not quilts that honor anything, but they just make you feel good. I hope. They feel good because the design does something to you. The color, the quirkiness, the eliciting of memories, the unexpected combinations. They don't teach or honor, they just are. And here are my dear cowboys. With a lot of fabrics that related to other parts of my life. My daughter used to sew a lot in high school. She made all her clothes. And so I had lots of little pieces from her, really little pieces. And I worked them in. The interesting thing about this is that while it looks as if, for example, that is a block, it is not a block. That is the block, and these blue pieces are totally in a sashing piece that runs down the side. So you have to keep track of what you're doing. And April Gilroy quilted that. And I think she did a great job. Did you notice the ponies and the dust and the cactus and everything? That was her idea. The next is, yeah. I bet they're getting tired. This is a Drunkard's Path variation in mostly Civil War fabrics, which are pretty drab. But when they're interrupted by a large block of neat flowers held together by brown centers, then it gets to be more fun. The fun is to find the bold colors in the middle of a staid background. Yeah. So if you have a dull quilt, cut out the middle and put something fancy in the middle. Yes, yeah, that's leftover. Yeah. And the next is an aloha quilt. What could make you feel better than a little quilt that reminds you of Hawaii, especially if you've been to visit a son in the Navy or something like that. So this is good for calming and quieting people and maybe remembering a great experience in Hawaii. This is needle turn applique. And the echo quilting is done entirely by eye. There's no marking of anything. You just, after a while, but you do it for 20 minutes and you've got it. And your eye just knows where that space comes. You go around an object, then you go around the line that you went around, you go around the next line. It's just, it goes out. Okay, this is called the hot chocolate quilt. It was an experiment with glue and machine applique, which I haven't done again. But it's fun, and it's a cheery quilt. It has every color, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, black, white, and brown. So people who think you can't put all those colors together, I think they work all right. Check out the hot chocolate. That's not coffee, that's hot chocolate, because you can see the marshmallows. It makes a kitchen very cheery. It's kind of a very simple, but a lot of glue and hit or miss machine applique. The next one is called Mariner's Compass and Its Relatives. And any way is right with that. Now the story of this quilt is that the center block was unfinished for 15 years because moi had to get glasses after making just one small piece of that. And I put it away thinking, this ruined my eyesight. I'm not doing this anymore. And then I got it out and I said, I wonder if I have any more of that fabric left. 15 years later, in my stash, there was the fabric. So I said, I can do this. So I finished the middle part, and then I thought, what will I add around the outside? The quilting in the beige sections are all different, but otherwise they are all rays that start in the middle and come out to the edge. And there are, the thing that I discovered when I was all done was that there was a lot of motion because these middle-sized ones are not opposite each other at all. And I don't know how it happened, but so there's a lot of motion there. And I liked that. And I love the yellow. The yellow is just really cheery. Yeah. And the whole back is yellow. But I don't look at the back. The back is terrible.
Was the center paper piece?
I don't even know how to paper piece. No. No.
So exact.
I took lessons in Newport where I almost went blind in one day. Bad lighting, everything your mother said about lighting, you know, it's true. I came home, it was on a Saturday, the next day I could not see the hymn book. I was in the choir, I couldn't see it. This is the hardest quilt I ever made. This comes from, it's a Valentine's Day celebration. It comes from an old issue of Yankee Magazine where they have a little woodcut kind of design with a poem that goes with it. And this one is called February Remedy, and I will read it to you. It says, a steaming bowl of cream of wheat brings feeling back to ears and feet. A steamy Valentine or two keeps human hearts from turning blue. The reason it was hard, if you bring it right here, the reason it's hard to do, and then this is the last quilt that I would try to replicate because I don't think I could do it anymore. You take a piece of black and put it on a piece of white, and then you draw lines. Then you cut those lines and turn them under just ever so slightly. I don't think I could do the hair again and have it come out right. In other words, these eyebrows weren't put on later. They were always there. They were turned under. Yeah. Then this is reverse applique. This is reverse applique. This is real applique. It's on top. So, this is the one I would not want to try again. But it's one of my favorites. The next one is just a fun quilt with a lot of animals sewed on the sides, on two of the sides anyway. It has 4 central blocks, and it has a series of hole-in-the-barn door blocks. And the interesting thing about this is much of it is made from home decorator fabrics, not quilt store cotton fabrics, but home, so you won't recognize, a lot of them you will not recognize because we don't buy them in typical quilt stores. It's hand appliqued, and if you turn it in half and hold up the bottom so that they can see the animals along the bottom, elephant and the flamingo and the mouse, etc. There are other animals on the other side too. This one has a wool batting. About this time I discovered wool for batting, and I like it very much. This is a soft, lovely feeling quilt, and not all of my quilts are. Some of them are kind of hard. Okay, this next one, let me just show you this. I went into the Artist Cooperative one day downtown in Westerly, and I saw this business card. And I said, oh, that's a quilt. And I went and found fabric, and I started to make it, and I thought, this woman lives in Westerly. She's going to find out. I better call her up. So I called her, and I made a new friend. She wanted to come to the house and see it. She completely applauded the idea that her painting would be made into a quilt. And she's come twice to see more quilts. She was never interested in quilts before. And I said, well, why don't you show me your picture? She said, I've sold it. I said, well, tell me how big it was. She said, it was 7 inches by 9 inches. Oh. That was 7 inches by 9 inches. So I started it not knowing what the size was, and it's kind of looks like Van Gogh to me a little bit. Yeah. The next one is from a French children's magazine. It was the center of the cover of a French children's magazine, and a child had done it. But there were 8 other blocks around it, all Christmas related. But this is the one I picked out that I wanted to do. I love these the ox and the ass and the baby Jesus. From a little French girl's point of view. I just thought it was grand. It looks pieced, but it isn't. It's totally applique. And a couple of years ago, I went to England with my other son, and our flight we couldn't travel on the day we were scheduled because the airline had called a strike. In England, they call a strike for certain days. We knew a week ahead that our plane would not go. They were going to be on strike that day. So we had to find accommodations and stay a couple more days while he arranged for us to go. And so we had this free time, didn't know quite what to do. So we went he likes museums even better than I do, and we went to the Albert and Victoria Museum. There was a photography special show for him, and there was a quilt show for me. So we separated for quite a while, and it was a marvelous retrospective British show, but this kind of thing was what caught my attention. The one I saw there was totally Liberty fabric. Wonderful. When I went to the gift shop, they had a big postcard of that one quilt. So I bought the postcard, and it took me a while. That's all applique. That is not, well, each of the flags is attached to the next flag with machine stitching, but the flags are made entirely by hand. And it is, you notice something that I had never noticed about British flags is that while these are equal, these are in the middle, these are not. They're off to one side. Well, that was the first thing I discovered. Then I realized what a lump I might get in the middle because there are a lot of layers there. But you press it hard enough and it works out. But I had planned this to have, not to use the same fabric in 2 different blocks. My granddaughter I thought I had done it. My granddaughter had looked at it for about a minute and a half. She says, oh, there are 2, Grandma. It's here and it's here. And I had worked months not to do that. Okay. So just 1 second before that one. This last one, you notice that's block quilt. And I had decided not to make block quilts. But what kept me going with that was to find a combination of colors, of fabrics, that would be interesting enough and mesh with the rest of the quilt. And that factor of finding the pieces kept me going, and I was able to get through another block quilt. Okay, I think that does that. This is the last quilt, I think, yes. This is a recent one, and I'm having it as the last quilt because this was made in 1875, and I am honoring the quilt maker She was honoring her house. We love our houses. We all love this house, this wonderful Babcock-Smith house. It's loved by probably thousands of people. But we all love our own house. And the play of our life is acted out in our houses. And this woman wanted to have her house, I'm sure, in her quilt. And I just really liked the folk art quality of the big birds, the large birds, and the stars not being in proportion. I like things that are not in proportion. They're kind of quirky. And the little story that goes with that, I think I have time to tell. Oh, I didn't bring that book, but I'll just tell you. This was the front cover of a book that I bought in the 70s in New York City. Dorothy Sue Thornton. How many people knew Dorothy Sue? Lots of people knew Dorothy Sue. She knew New York City very well. So she would take me and we would go to quilt shows, museums. This particular time we went to the Thomas K. Woodard Antique Quilt Store. Fabulous. And we were there for about 20 minutes looking around, just thrilled at what we were seeing. And all of a sudden, 3 German people came in, talked to the owner, and he started telling them about the quilts, and he realized they were really serious. They were going to buy quilts to take home to Germany. And he turned to us and he said, "We're closing the store now." We were the only other 2 in the store. "We're closing the store now for a private sale." And all I could think of was, I was with Dorothy Sue Thornton when she was thrown out of a store. If you knew Dorothy, you know she didn't get thrown out of many places. But on the way out, I spotted a book, and I said, "Wait a minute, I want to buy that book." And I did. And it was a quilt that was never finished. It was just a top. I don't know what happened to her, but she didn't ever make it into a quilt. So I don't know how she quilted it, couldn't see, so I quilted it my own way. And it's an interesting combination of new fabrics. The blue is very, very new, the sky. Those brown pieces are 40 years old. It's a real combination of stash, new and old. So, well, my gals got through the whole thing. Just the last little word. You've noticed that I love my quilts. I've spent a lot of time with them. I am in a lot of good company. American women are part of a worldwide enthusiasm, particularly women in Japan, France, Australia, England, Canada. I went to Ukraine with my big son, and we were staying with a missionary, and she said, "There's a quilt group that meets on Monday afternoon. You want to go?" So I had brought some quilts with me in my bag. Yeah, sure. So we went, and I discovered that those women are just as entranced by fabric and color and design and huge excitement about what they were doing because it was new to them. This was brand new. And they had a quilt store. It wasn't much of a quilt store, but I went there too, and it was great. Well, the older quilters, people who have quilted for a long time, I hope you've seen an idea that you might use to enhance your quilting sometime. And for you non-quilters, I hope you've expanded your sense of what may be done in our craft or art, whatever it is. Thank you very much for coming.